hope you've all had a great day. It's nice to be here to close it out. I know I won't keep you too long. You'll be out on time, I promise. Don't fall asleep. Everybody had a little lull after lunch. That's all good. So essentially, I mean, it was a great introduction. But yeah, this is me. And a bit of a spoiler alert in the title, I won a gold medal. So, you know, sometimes I try and keep that back, but you've got that right up front today. So, I mean, when I was putting the title slide together, and people ask me what my job is, it depends on the day, how I answer. Paralympic champion, that's not really a job. That was just an opportunity that came good. Well, probably one of the reasons I'm here today is I co-founded the Ability People, which I'll talk about more in just a second. And then I've been really fortunate since retiring that I moved straight into broadcasting with the Paralympics, and that's constantly evolving. And I exec produced the coverage for Channel 4 of Paris recently. That's my most recent job, I guess. And ultimately, where I found myself is an inclusion consultant. And that is not the exhaustive list, but we really don't have time. And like I said, I'm really fortunate that every day is different. But ultimately, I've ended up here because of opportunity. And the privilege that I've had to grow up in a world where the people that were supporting me didn't focus on me and my differences, but they focused on what my capabilities were. And there's plenty of stories that will bring that to life. And where that links back to you all is that we live in a world where it's fast-paced and the time to hire is short and time is money and we need to get things done. So if we need to fill a gap, we look at what worked before and quite often we go with that again. Like, it's foolproof. Like, why wouldn't you? If it's not broken, don't fix it, right? And the majority of the time, it doesn't fail. It always works. But what it does sometimes lead to is the fact that we might miss out on better talent because times change, things change, the world evolves, opportunities evolve, and so we don't know what people's capabilities are. So that is how the Ability People came about, really. And I won't talk about the Ability People too much, but it does form a large part of who I am these days. And I think this is the same for anybody that comes here looking to make the world of recruitment fairer. We've all got this one goal. It's a simple goal. And humankind and kindness means that it should dictate everything in that we're looking for that parity of opportunity. We're looking to create a field of equity where everybody gets the opportunity and the chance to showcase what they're capable of and be the best version of themselves. And you're like, great, how does that link to a gold medal, right? We'll get there, I promise. But ultimately, I've been lucky. And yes, you create your own luck, but you do need some things to fall into place for you, right? And I am a product of everything that has happened to me. The good, the bad, and actually, I would say sometimes the completely unnecessary. But ultimately, what it's taught me in my almost 40 years on the planet is that the majority of those cheesy cliches that you hear are actually true. And you can take them as you need them. And I've been fortunate, the opportunities are given me that I've had have had a positive impact on me as a person, on my life, that have led me to this stage here today. But more than that, I'm really proud to be in a position where I can impact other people positively as well. And that's why I talk about that job as an exec producer for Paralympics. When I was a kid, the Paralympics wasn't even on the television, right? So this is what I'm talking about with evolution. That bike is annoying, isn't it? How have you managed that all day? But anyway, it's all good. So the evolution of life and the changes. So as a child, if you've asked me, people did ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up. Eventually, I said a Paralympic swimmer and champion. But in terms of a real job, because my dad said swimmers don't make any money and Paralympians definitely don't make any money, I was like, well, I like maths and I like money, so I'll be an accountant. I would never have come up with what I do now for a living and all the different guises because they didn't exist. And people like me definitely weren't on the television and definitely wouldn't have been put in positions where we get to make big decisions about what goes on the television and how that looks. So that's why we've always got to keep that open mind to focus, and when we're creating parity of opportunity, appreciate that we're not supposed to have all the answers. We're not supposed to know everything. Every day is a school day, whoever you are, right? And actually, that's what makes us better people. That's what makes our teams better. That's what makes our organizations better. And ultimately, that's what's made me who I am. Because there was a time where people who were disabled didn't get the same opportunities. And it isn't about having a disability, right? But that's a fact. There was a time where black people couldn't use the same entrance. There was a time where women couldn't work in certain jobs. And times change. And we should never stop looking to create that equity. And for me, swimming provided that opportunity. Now, I wouldn't, if I was 10 again, which I won't be unless they make it like a movie, sounds like a movie, I would not be a Paralympic swimmer. In an ideal world, in fact, I was at an event yesterday and we were playing tennis. And they were like, oh, you're really good at tennis? And I was like, yeah, because that would have been my sport. But at the Paralympics, we only have wheelchair tennis. We don't have ambulant tennis. They're working on it, but we don't have it. So it wasn't an option for me, right? So it wasn't a case of there was nothing they could do about it at the time. So I looked for another option. But I was 10 when I really started swimming, and it all came about because I couldn't play netball for the school like everybody else. But I learned that I was different. I knew I was different. It's very obvious to me when I was growing up that the majority of people could use 2 fully functioning hands and 2 fully functioning legs. Now, not everybody, but most people. It's fair to say that. And so I always knew I was different, but I never considered myself to be disabled because I was in an environment where my mum always taught me to focus on my goals and the objective of a task rather than the way in which I did it or that other people did it. And the first time I really learned the lesson was learning to play a musical instrument. I went home and I said to my mum, can I play a musical instrument? And she said, if you want to, what would you like to play? And I was like, well, all my friends are talking about the flute. Flute's pretty, it looks good. And she was like, okay. And I was like, so I might play the flute. And she was like, well, do you think there's going to be a problem with that? Remember, I'm 7. And I was like, yeah, you probably need 2 fully functioning hands, don't you? Or at least 8 fingers, you need to be able to press all the valves. And she was like, yeah. She's like, you can play the flute if you want. You can be like everybody else. But she said, you won't reach your potential. She said, why don't we go and find an instrument that you can play? So we went to the music store that Saturday, went around every single instrument that they had, and I settled on a cornet. And not the type that holds ice cream, right? And at the time, it was because I had puny arms. I didn't always have a bicep like this. I had puny arms, and I was 7, and you only needed 3 fingers for the valves. So in the car on the way home, my mum was like, look, I know you're disappointed it wasn't your first choice. And so does that poor lady in the music store that just spent her entire Saturday morning to hire out a cornet for half a term. She said, but unless you choose to tell anyone any of this story, obviously I just told all you, then no one will ever know, right? No one will ever know. And actually now, how good you are at playing this cornet, or good at music, is on you. It's on how hard you work, how much you practice, how much you want to do it. Now it's not reliant on anybody else or anything out of your control. And I can hear you going, yeah, and... But that was the point. The point was it taught little old me, who, to the naked eye, does not look any different, right? I've sat on the floor a number of times today, and people have gone, you all right down there? Is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. But there's not enough, there wasn't a seat. So I don't mind, I'll sit on the floor. But if I had worn a skirt or shorts, everyone would have offered me a seat, right? Because you have that visual stimulus. And difference isn't always visible. It isn't always a protected characteristic. And we talk a lot about reasonable adjustments, and they're a good starting point, but they're not the answer. The answer, and we heard Cordelia talking about it earlier, if you were in her session, is being intentional about making sure that you create opportunity for equity. And that's about removing all of the unnecessary barriers that exist, whether it be in your environment, in your process, or just in your thoughts, right? So little old me, who doesn't look any different, just look like they're a bit clumsy, would never have got to be that swimmer if the Paralympics hadn't existed. So we do need opportunity, but we do need people to advocate for us, because quite often we ask people, what do you need to make this better? But I didn't know what I needed, because it was normal for me to be competing against my non-disabled friends at school. That was how I'd grown up, so I just thought you had to work harder, right? And everybody pats you on the back for working harder and being resilient and not giving up. But actually, and that's great. They're traits we all need, but we don't need them 24/7. They're exhausting. We need to be able to optimize our performance so that we can be the best version of ourselves. And we need to do that for our talent pools as well. And so, like I said, little old me didn't really consider myself to be disabled. I knew I had a disability. I knew it was cerebral palsy. I knew how it impacted me. And I would tell anybody who asked, if they were not being rude, if they were trying to better themselves and increase their knowledge, then I would explain that. But if anybody offered me help, I'd decline it, because I was brought up to believe that it was okay and I could do anything. And I can do most things. I can't get money out of my hand, and I can't turn my right hand over, but nobody needs to do that anyway, really. But I was at a position where how good I was going to be at something was being limited by something that I couldn't control. So after the cornet story and the frustration of not being able to play netball, that was the first time I felt disabled. And actually, when we talk about being disabled or having a disability, they're not the same. And that's what we also need to think about when we're looking at inclusive hiring and inclusive processes and just inclusion generally, is remove all unnecessary barriers to give people the opportunity to be successful. And swimming created that for me. And what it did is it created a field of play for me to be the best version of myself, to build my confidence, to realize I was good at something, and to transfer that into other areas. So that I could develop something that I loved, I could work hard, I could experience heartache, I could experience disappointment, but ultimately I could learn all of those lessons that were going to stand me in good stead for life. There's no clock. Is there a clock in here? Can anyone see a clock? Because I can't. I don't need it. I've got one, but I'm just like, is there a bell? No, there isn't one. It's fine. So, ultimately, would I be a swimmer now? Absolutely not. Would I change the fact that I was a swimmer? Absolutely not. Because what the cornet taught me, what swimming taught me, was that obstacles create opportunities. We see obstacles as frustration and disappointment and problems. But actually, sometimes they just make us take a step back and look at what we can do, or we navigate them to go down a different path that will lead to somewhere better. And as a swimmer, I was 10 years old when I went to my first national championships. And I met some people there that were going to the Paralympics in Atlanta in 1996, so showing my age once again. And I was like, I didn't know what the Paralympics was. I loved sport, I had a disability, but I didn't know what the Paralympics was. And this goes back to the idea of it's not enough to ask people what they want, because sometimes they don't know what's available. So it's about stripping it back and working out what the challenge is. There anything that causes you a challenge? What can we do about that? Right? The burden should never be on one person to fix all the problems. So I was like, I'm going to go to the Paralympics in 2004. They were in Athens. And then 4 years later, I'm going to go to Beijing. I'm going to win a gold medal. Because if you say it out loud, that's how it goes, right? So I actually ended up qualifying for Sydney in 2000. And I was 14, and I was going to Australia without my parents. It was going to be amazing. And then I got reclassified. Now, anybody that's watched the Paralympics is like, that is very confusing. But essentially, the way it's done is, in swimming, it's done on your functional ability and your capability. So you might not race someone who looks like you, but they have the same level of opportunity to achieve in the water. So it's a bit like in boxing or taekwondo when you've got a weight category and you're in that. It's just not as easy to move up and down, right? So I got moved up, so I was no longer eligible because people were too fast. And I was super disappointed. And I didn't swim for 6 months. But then I watched the Paralympics, and I said to myself, I'm never sitting on this sofa again if I can avoid it. I'm going to do everything I can to go to Athens and then to win a gold medal. So going to Athens involved getting up at 4:47 and getting on the road by 4:53. And I lived in Newport in South Wales, and I swam in Swansea, also in South Wales, but at the other end of the M4. So I was driving 1,000 miles a week, and I was at school, was it 30 hours a week you go to school? I don't even know, it was so long ago. And ultimately, that was my life, because I was like, it was my only option, and I wanted to finish school, because you always got to have a backup plan, but I also wanted to go to Athens. And I qualified for Athens, and I got called for classification, and I got moved back down back into my original classification. And for a little minute, I was really angry that I hadn't gone to Australia. But what I realized was, if I had gone to Australia, I probably wouldn't have wanted to get up at 4:47 every morning, and I wouldn't have wanted to drive 1,000 miles a week, and I wouldn't have wanted to be at the house 17 and a half hours a day, right? So that was my why. My why did this happen? What is in it for me was that it made me a stronger, more motivated, more determined person and gave me a reason to get up in the morning. So then I came back from Athens, and instead of going to get experience, I actually ended up coming back with a silver medal. Now, silver's pretty good. Like, some people say it's the first loser, but for me, it wasn't. I did a best time, and the girl that beat me, she smashed me by 3 seconds. And I was like, if it feels this good to come second, then how amazing is it going to be to win? So when I came back, I went to university, and again, there's so much in life that we can't control. You know that. In your jobs daily, things happen that you've got no control over. And they frustrate you and they make you feel helpless. But we've always got a choice to how we respond. So when I was picking my university, I made a list of all the good swim squads and a list of all the good business schools, and I married them all up. And I ended up sticking with Swansea. Because I wanted to control what I could control. Again, there's your cheesy cliche, right? But it meant that I could go to university. I couldn't go out 4 nights a week, like my friends were. But I could go and I could enjoy university life a bit. I could swim with a coach that knew me well. And I didn't end up with a massive overdraft and a beer belly because I wasn't going out those 4 nights a week, right? And at the end of my first year at university, I broke my first ever world record. I was the fastest person in the world. And I was like, well, that was a good move. So I was like, tick, move on. And then I looked at my schedule for swimming, and I had world championships in my final year. So I worked really hard in my second year at uni, and then I really focused on my third year for swimming. And I took 30 credits of my degree in the first semester because I was going to South Africa for 3 weeks, I was going to Macau for 4 weeks, and then I took 90 credits in the second semester, which would have been smart if I hadn't had 6 exams in 8 days. And the way that I used to revise was write the notes out the night before, give them to my coach. He would read a bit out to me every time I stopped at the wall. I'd remember them as I swam, and then I'd go to my exam and sit in the next one. So that doesn't really work when you're trying to remember all that information, but it did work for me. So I finished university, and I got my degree, and I got 3 gold medals and a world record at the World Championships. So I'm like, right, tick. There's a lot of ticking in my life, right? Exactly where I need to be. I'm going to have 1 full year of being a full-time athlete into Beijing. And I enjoyed that for probably about 3 months, I reckon. I ate when I wanted, I slept when I wanted. I realized you could stay up past 9 o'clock if you could have a nap in the day. And then I got a call from my mum to tell me that she was going into hospital because she needed an operation to remove a mass that they'd found. And I was like, okay, do you need me to come home? No, all good. Fine. I'll ring you when I get home from the hospital. Okay. So she rang, true to her word. And I said, how did it go? And she said, well, they couldn't do the procedure because my blood pressure was 230 over 170. Now, you don't need to be a doctor to know that that was not good. And it turned out that she had a 13.5 centimetre mass here on her cervix at the end. And she was 5 foot tall, so pretty big. And it turned out that she had terminal cancer. And honestly, that was, at that point of my life, that was the worst I'd ever felt in my entire existence. Because she was my person who always had all the answers, who always, I could ring to ask how long a pizza needed to go in the oven for. I could ask for something a little more specific and deep. And I just suddenly realized that she wasn't going to be around forever. Now, I've worked with cancer charities, and I've met people who've lived 20 odd years with cancer. But I've also met people who've not lasted 24 hours. Like I haven't met them, obviously. I've met their relatives. And so, again, for me, it was a sign, it was a stimulus, an opportunity to make sure that I prioritized my time with her. And I was grateful for swimming, because I could go there and I could train really hard and I could get really angry and I could cry in the water and all these things. And it worked, because I broke the world record again in December. And I was like going into another tick. I was going into 2008 exactly where I needed to be. But I was training in a way that structurally wasn't good for me. And I ended up pulling my left shoulder, which is I would argue, my best limb, my strongest limb, the week of the Paralympic trials. Whew. So I spoke to everyone, and I realized if I pulled out of all my races, then I could probably sneak into the team, and then we'd come up with a plan, right? And I was like to my physio, yeah, but my 100 breaststroke's not till day 6 at Beijing, and blah, blah, blah. I really need a practice race. And he was like, Liz, if you do that, there won't be a practice race because you won't make it. So I was like, okay. And I'd always loved swimming because I thought, individual sport, I'm in control of my destiny. I've only got myself to blame. I can make, and not in an egotistical way, just in a control way, right? Like I was like, if I don't succeed, it was my own fault, right? But that day and that week and those next 6 months, I realized that it was not about me at all. I stand on the block, but it takes me a whole team of people to get there. And actually, I had to do that thing where I trusted other people. I delegated what I was going to eat and what my swimming was going to look like, because I didn't swim a single stroke of breaststroke from the day I qualified until the day before I left to go to Beijing. So again, you've got to sometimes put in the effort, trust the process, right? Take a step back, go with a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Because Beijing was 2008, Atlanta 96 was when I decided I wanted to be a Paralympic champion. Decided, it doesn't always work like that, but anyway. So it took me 12 years to get to the point, from 10 to 22, to get to that point, right? I didn't know if I was going to win. I didn't know what was going on. And we got to Beijing, and we'd been in Macau, and I had all my best friends with me. And we arrived in Beijing, and I still didn't know if I was going to be able to swim. But we arrived to the news that my mum had passed away. So my mum passed away while we were flying from Macau to Beijing. And I knew she was sick, but I genuinely didn't know that she was going to die, while I was gone. I had no inkling. To the point that when people asked me why my coach was crying when they saw it earlier, I went, I don't know, one of my teammates was on dialysis. I was like, well, maybe he can't come. I literally had no clue. And then all of a sudden, it was a good job that my 100 breaststroke wasn't till day 6, because I would not have been ready. And we went in the Paralympics, we only have heats and finals. So you swim in the morning, you qualify for the night, and then you try and win your gold medal. So in the heats, I went as fast as I could because I didn't know if I was going to make it, right? And I qualified fastest for the final, which to everybody who didn't know what was going on, they all knew my mum died, that made the 10 o'clock news, but they didn't know I had a bad shoulder. To all of them, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, lane 4. But to me, and what I said to my friends when we got back to the flat was that's all I've got. I can put on a new suit, I can shave my legs, I can drink a cup of coffee, all these things that I thought would help. But I literally have got nothing more. The girls either side of me, they went out a second and a half quicker than me to the halfway point. Then they just kicked it off and came back. And so I was like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And I used to really worry about the expectation on me that I put on myself that other people put on me, the pressure of letting people down or something going wrong. But because there was so much going on, my brain was empty. And in the final, I mean, you all know I won, so it's fine. But in the final, I stood behind the block, and for the first time ever, I saw it for what it was. It was 2 lengths of a pool that I had done countless times, and I just had to get there and back before anyone else, right? That was it. It's that simple. So when the gun went, or beeper or whatever goes off, can't even remember, I went too fast, some would argue. I went as fast as I could, and I broke the world record at the halfway point. But then when I started to come back, the fact I hadn't trained for 6 months started to take hold, and I just looked like I was going up and down, and the whole field was coming back at me. And there's a photo of my friends stood in the crowd, and they're all like this. And I'm like, what is going on in that photo? They're like, we're watching your race. Basically, in this race, we catch the last 25 meters where I'm in the lead, and then everyone's closing on me, and I touch the wall. It looks closer than it is. I won by half a second, but it looks like nothing. And I didn't win in a world record like I'd planned to, and I didn't win by a body length and a half like I planned to. But let me tell you this, no one cares. I didn't care. I was just super relieved that I'd won. And actually, 4 years later, I went to London, I swam quicker, and I say only, I got a bronze. But and it's all about taking that moment in that time, in that day. And so ultimately, what it taught me was forget the noise. Forget pressure is a privilege. If you're feeling the pressure, it's because you have the capability to achieve, and you have an opportunity. So if you had no pressure, it's because people don't think you're good enough, right? And if you're not feeling nervous, it's because you don't care. So actually, I was 22. I was at a school yesterday, and I told them when I won my gold medal, and I was like, yeah, none of you were born, because it was 17 and a half years ago. Ugh. But what it did teach me was that you can't be dictated to by what happens to you. There's so much that happens to us that is out of our control, but we let it define us. And we're human, it's going to. You can let it impact you, but then make sure that you surround yourself with the right people to support you. And that whether that's work, whether that's socially, because we've all got those goals and aspirations, it's not a bad thing to ask for help. Being vulnerable, and I've learned this in recent years, is a huge strength. Whatever level of your organization you're at, being vulnerable, asking questions, being open to learning new things, to stepping out of your comfort zone, that is ultimately where the magic happens. The magic of a gold medal. Now, that gold medal does not define me. It is pretty definitive in that, no one argues that on that day you were the best, right? But what I've learned retrospectively is I could have had exactly the same prep, I could have swum even quicker, and I could have lost, right? Like I said, I did in London. You can't have goals that are only measured by things that you can't control, because otherwise you run the risk of never being satisfied, never feeling successful, and it impacts the way you live, the way you work, the way you socialize, the way you feel about yourself. So if you had asked me in any part of my journey, and probably even beyond that to London, until I retired, what does success look like? I probably would have said a gold medal, right? But now I look and I'm like, it's not that at all. It's contentment and happiness, which again is a little bit cheesy, but it's true. We spend a lot of time at work. We spend a lot of time dead, unfortunately. So we've got to live. And you can't always be doing something that you love for every minute of every day, but you do need to find a little bit of joy in everything that you do. Because that gold medal moment and that story, and that could be a movie in itself I'm paraphrasing because of the time, but just last year, my sister, in fact, her birthday's Friday, she was 33 on May the 16th, and on June the 10th, she went to bed and didn't wake up. And so that's why I said, at that point, Finding out my mum was sick was probably the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. But actually, I will always be grateful for the warning that my mum was going to die. Because my sister, I had no warning, and she was truly a pain in my ass. But she was my pain in the ass, and I was not prepared, and I was not ready. And so everything happens for a reason. Sometimes the reason becomes very apparent very quickly, and sometimes it does not. But what it has taught me is lots of different things, but one, and we'll get there, actually we'll work through these and then we'll get there. So control the controllables, because ultimately, and this goes to you guys as well, whether it be at work, it's not always easy, but if you take ownership of the aspects of a process or your role that you can control and have influence on, then you will navigate the barriers and achieve your objectives. It might not be easy, but it will be worth it. And like I said, obstacles create opportunities. So take a step back. Why are things not working? Why are we losing deals? What can we do differently? What can make us more efficient? The effects of the market, we can't control the market, but we can control how we combat the effects of them. And then I think my biggest thing is that short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. It is so hard sometimes to keep going when your goal seems unachievable or really far away. But actually, it is always worth it. And even if you don't achieve the ultimate goal, if I had not achieved that gold medal, I still learned so much about myself. I still developed so many soft skills. I still developed a great group of friends that are more than family and that get me through life every single day. And if it hadn't been for swimming, I wouldn't know them, because they wouldn't have been my people at school. 100% wouldn't have been my people at school. But they have been with me through it all. And we all say, none of our other friends get us. And if things go wrong, the first phone call is someone that you swam with. Because you know that they have all the same soft skills as you, and when you can't think, they'll do the thinking for you. Does that make sense? So that pressure, again, I said it earlier, but that pressure is a privilege. If we can flip that thinking, accept that you're feeling that pressure, but think of the why, and try and almost rationalize it. And whether you use your support circle to do that, it doesn't matter. But know that pressure means that something incredible could be happening, and we've just got to figure out a plan to make it happen. And then ultimately find your why. What is in it for you? And if you talk to a bunch of year 9s, 14-year-olds, they'll want to know what's in it for them in the next 30 seconds, right? When I go into schools, that's what they want to know. If they can't get the answer in 30 seconds, they don't want it. But that what's in it for me is the driver for everything. Because life is hard and bad things happen. And we are challenged every day, every week, every month, every year. But if we're motivated to achieve, then it gives us the strength and the desire and the power and the ability to keep going. So we live in this world that isn't built for the majority of us, because we're basically doing what has always been done. Things have evolved, like we said, but they will continue to change forever. And actually, every single person has their version of a Paralympic gold medal, right? And everybody is going to experience adversity. And actually, I hope that you never have the dramatic lifestyle that I've had. Wouldn't wish that on anyone. But there's people who've had worse, and there's people who had not. But it doesn't make your challenges, your struggle any more or any less. It's how you feel it, and it's making sure that you get the support that you need from whoever that is at whatever time to know that you are capable. Because the finding your why. I was a little girl who was competitive and loved sport. And I entered a world of swimming that probably wouldn't have been my first choice. But I promise you I wouldn't change a single thing about it, because it's made me absolutely everything that I am. And it's put me in the privileged opportunity where now I can help others in a world that, like I said, wouldn't have existed. And there's still a lot, I started coming at it from a world of disability employment because that was what resonated with me and that was the most shocking statistic that was out there. But actually, inclusion is about creating that equity for everybody, normalizing those differences. Because if you look around the room, we're all different, but we've all also got so many other aspects that make us different that if we're trying to fight to compete against everybody else in their world, then we're never going to reach our potential. And we're never going to be the team player that we could be. So ultimately, like I said, no one ever believed me. Everybody wants to see the gold medal. There it is. But like everyone's got their version of this Paralympic gold medal dream. I'm lucky that mine's tangible and it's a piece of metal on a ribbon. It's more than that, but that is essentially what it is. But everyone's got theirs too. And they can change, they can evolve. But if we stick to these 5 things, then we can overcome. I'm not saying we can do everything, but we can definitely overcome the challenges that come our way. So thank you very much, team. I, at this point, need to ask you, at least you're all still awake, that's a positive. I don't know if anyone has any questions or I've just bombarded you with drama and trauma. But yeah, you can ask me whatever you want, really. I haven't got enough hands for this. Look, there is one more slide. No, we've gone the wrong way. There you go. So you can email me or whatever works for you. LinkedIn. I'm trying to be better at LinkedIn. But yes, there you go. So that is me. And there we go.
Amazing.